That's right. That's right.
Good morning, everybody. Good to see you all today in Bible study this morning. We have a special guest with us today, Pastor John Schmidtke from Bethlehem Lutheran Church in St. Louis. He's here today to talk about his experiences in urban ministries, how we can reach out to different ethnicities and minorities here, and the place God has called us to as well. He has a lot of insight and knowledge into urban ministry. We have a lot of questions that were asked of him this past week that we're going to dive into a little as well. But as always, we start with a word of prayer. Gracious God, we thank you and we praise you for who you are. That you have sent your Son, Jesus Christ, in the flesh to bear our sin and be our Savior. He is the reason we do everything that we do. As we reach out and minister the gospel, it is for the reason to share your love with the lost and dying world. We ask that you would bless Pastor Schmidtke today as he brings us your very word, that you would open our hearts and our minds to what he has to teach us today. In your mighty holy name, all God's people said, Amen. All right.
Well, glad to be with you today. I see familiar faces. I was telling Pastor Dale, it's the first time I've been in this building. We've seen each other, some of you, 100 million times over in the gymnasium, either when I was coaching at Atonement or you've seen my son who coaches basketball at Bethlehem, and then sometimes you saw me in black and white stripes, maybe for good, maybe for not so good, but I'm glad to be here. I also want to say, as we get started, if you hear me cough, I am bivocational. I am the pastor of Bethlehem, but I also work another job. I have a grass business, so it's grass season, it's allergy season, and that's why I cough a little bit more. So, well, originally at Pastor Taylor's invitation, I was going to bring a Bible study, and then as the questions came in, so many good questions, I thought, and he agreed that maybe it'd be better just to do a question and answer. We'll talk a lot about God's Word and what God's doing through that. So, how do you want to start this, Pastor Taylor? Somebody up, first question, or I've got the list that we have.
Lots of questions. The first question was, Pastor, in light of working in urban ministry, how do you work with people whose stories are so different than your own?
When I was at the seminary, I got into urban ministry this way. So I came from Sheboygan, Wisconsin, 50,000 people, which at that time, if there were 40 people out of 50,000 who were not Caucasian, German origin, it would have been, counting people twice. And so I went to Concordia here in St. Louis, and while at Concordia in St. Louis, there was a course that everybody had to take, still in the same way. It's called Pastor's Educator. And part of your Pastor's Educator time is you had to go into a school, a Lutheran school, and for 3 weeks teach religion. And so I ended up going, a very good friend of mine, I played on the SEM basketball team, and a good friend of mine, Jimmy Gillespie, who is African American, he said, I'm going down to Zion. Remember Zion, some of you, on 20th and Benton, the old Zion in the Old North St. Louis neighborhood. And at that time, they had a school. And I said, okay, Jimmy, let's go down there. I had never had any impact in the city. In fact, my wife will tell you, and maybe bring her up here in a little bit, or whenever you want to just jump in. So here's John Schmidtke. When we came to look at the seminary, down near St. Louis Avenue, if you know where Crown Candy is, a block or two west of Crown Candy was one of those old Clark Super 100 gas stations. it's since been changed to a shell and that. When we came to St. Louis, so we got lost. I mean, you think about, we got lost in a place that is now 6 blocks from where I've spent most of my life. And we got lost. We went to the Clark station. We needed gas. And then Sharon said, I got to go to the bathroom. And I was like, no, let's not go to the bathroom here. And you remember Clark didn't have bathrooms that were inside. Clark, you had to go outside, that thing. So she goes in the bathroom, I put gas in the tank, and I'm like, she hasn't come out of the bathroom yet. And so I go over and I'm like banging on the door, Sharon, come on, are you in there? And that was me. That was me. So it wasn't that I was racist or prejudiced, it was that I just had not experienced city life. My wife, she worked in New Jersey, in Newark, so she knew all about city life. And anyway, I went to Zion Lutheran School being as a seminarian for 3 weeks. At the time, I was field working at St. John in Ellisville, so 2 worlds that were so vastly different. And I went to, I did the 3 weeks, and I remember sitting with Terry Mooney. Terry Mooney was the principal at Zion at that point, who was actually in Christ Peoria. You guys have battled him basketball-wise, if any basketball families are here. Terry Mooney, I said, Terry, so how do I teach black kids? And he looked me in the face and he said, John, said, you teach black kids like you teach any other kids. They're kids, period, end of story. Terry was right. And that was God's turning point in my life. I left St. John Ellisville, field work out there. I went into Zion, and here we are. And so I didn't start at Bethlehem. I vicared at Christ Lutheran in Peoria. They called me back at Christ Lutheran in Peoria for 2 years, and then we came to Bethlehem in 1989, and we've been here ever since. So how do you work in a place that's different than yours? You just be authentic. You be who you are. Now you understand the culture and the community. I've been told that I preach in a different kind of a fashion. You'll taste that if you're courageous enough to stay for worship. That's just who I am, and I don't know, that God just forms and tailors you, but you be real. I'm not black, I'm white, and God's blessed that. Other questions? Well, from those that were sent in.
Sure. One of the questions is what is the most difficult part of working in urban ministries?
I think you want to come up now at this time because there's going to be take your mask off. There's going to be 2 perspectives. So for me, I think the hardest part in working in the ministry in urban place is that there are so many. There's so much to do, and the resources are not always available. It's tough because, as my daughter says, our church acts like a big church. If you came and you saw all the things, opportunities to offer to reach people with the gospel of Jesus Christ, but we're a small church with a small church budget. 1 out of every $6 for our ministry comes from the offering plate. That means 5 out of every 6 come from outside of Bethlehem, which computes to in a $300,000 budget that every year we're counting on God for $250,000. And that is both exciting, but sometimes it's also challenging. And I think here's the thing that I think is one of the toughest things. Can you put that up at this time, Ryan? So I'm not trying to make a plug for my book, but I just wrote a book. And I didn't plan to write a book. I wrote a book only because there are a lot of people who said, John, you ought to write and sit down and write, what you've seen to help the next person here. Well, if you look up at this, you can kind of read it as it is, or I'll just describe it. That might be the best way instead of us just reading it. So I described this young lady, true story, Tiana. Actually, not just one true story, but many times. Tiana came to our church. She was a single mom with 3 kids. In fact, her kids were going to our first charter school that we had. Tiana was doing really well with us. Her mom, she was doing really well with us. She lived like 2 blocks from our church. And then she had an opportunity to move to the south side. She was in a bad place in the neighborhood where there was a lot of drug traffic with her kids. She got to move to the south side. That was great. It was a better place for her to stay. But all the pluses of being connected to Bethlehem, and she was going deep south. That was where the place was. All the pluses of being connected to Bethlehem now were becoming harder. She didn't have a car. She had a job, but then because of her kids, she had to quit the job because she didn't have childcare for that. She had no family support. Her mom was a crack addict. The church was her place where she really could be supported. She didn't finish high school, so she was basically unemployable, sort of in a way, to be able to have a job that would be able to take care of her family. And basically, though, the essay that I wrote is called "A Tangled Web." That's one of the hardest things in the ministry in the city, because there are so many connected pieces. That when someone, let's say, has a child, and sometimes people in the church have said, bad, you had a child out of wedlock. Yeah, but most of the time people have come to the church, that already happened, Now sometimes it happens, again, and we go through confession and absolution like that, but then when someone says, I know this wasn't God's will, and I'm sorry about it, and God forgives you for Jesus' sake, there's so many pieces. How do you deal with that? A place to live, schools. And so sometimes that picture just gets overwhelming. And here's I think the thing that is can be the most discouraging part. You just get going with a family, and maybe they're around for a year, 18 months, and they're growing, they're coming to Bible study, their kids are around, things are going well with their kids. There's a turning, you can see a turning in their face and in their life from hopelessness to hopefulness. And then one of the pieces of the tangled web falls apart. And it, like a domino, whacks so many other pieces. What do you do in that? Well, there have been various answers from not just society, but God's church at large. God's church at large, and I'm speaking not just of Lutherans, and not just of Caucasian churches, but black churches, Hispanic churches, and all that. Many times, the poorest of the poor, the church at large has said, you don't fit. Now, they don't say that, but it's like this. We work in some of the projects, like down on 14th and Castle, Fallon Place, or out South Side, Peabody. We do ministry in the projects there. And sometimes I say to myself, you know what? If we could get all the mega churches, the big churches, to be an army, we could go in and we could take those projects like that with resources, holistic things, help people with jobs and equipping and all that. And we always tie it to the gospel because that's our business. We're in the Jesus business. But sometimes it becomes overwhelming because you're like, oh man, she was doing so good, or he was doing so good. And then, so you end up being the person who becomes their connector. Pastor Gerard Bowling is with me now through a grant, through this thing called More Greater Things, a ministry that we're trying to, duplicate what happens at Bethlehem. And we both sometimes just get overwhelmed by it because you just you can't touch everybody's situation. And we are not called to fix everybody's problems. We can't fix everybody's problems. But for many people, there's just not someone around who deals with all those different kind of things. Go ahead. Tell us about, what do you think is the hardest thing?
It kind of works the same way. I come from an educator's perspective, and I've been teaching in the city for 3 decades. So I see Bethlehem through those same eyes. And, you know, in a classroom, you see so many kids that you wish you could just take home, because that, you know, that's the only way you're going to fix them. They have so many different issues going on in their life. Their parents are not even talking to each other. They barely know each other. They're fighting with each other. Whatever that situation is, the kid's stuck in the middle. There's always some kind of academic issues going on as a result of not doing homework. Oh, we didn't have electricity last night because it got shut off. I've worked with teenagers who have been out on the streets and homeless because they're over 16, so when mama puts them out, they end up in adult centers and they don't want to be with the adults overnight. So there's so many different problems that you get to a point where it's like, the only way I'm going to be able to fix this kid is to just take him out of everything, take him home, and fix him that way. You can't do that with everybody. You just can't. And so, yeah, like John was saying, there's so many problems. But then when you flip it over and look at it from the church side of things, there's only so many of us. And everybody is doing 2, 3, 4, 5 different jobs within the church to help make things happen. And it's hard to keep empowering them and encouraging them. We got to keep going, we got to keep going. Because it gets tiring after a while. It just gets downright tiring. So, you know, you get some folks that, I'm not doing that anymore, that's too much. And you have to find a way to encourage and empower and keep them going, because the work never stops. It never stops.
I think on the good side, you know, so we created this program called More Greater Things. First there was Greater Things for 3 years, and then there's More Greater Things now, and we're almost halfway through it. And here's what More Greater Things does. It has 3 goals. Number 1, we are trying to, now in More Greater Things, reach into the Ferguson area. We want to take the blessings of what we've learned about urban ministry at Bethlehem and duplicate them other places. And so we've moved into the Ferguson area to do ministry, real dynamic ministry with kids there. Second thing that we do is we also have a deaf ministry at Bethlehem, and that's growing. The third piece is, especially with More Greater Things, is that we have, unlike our first time with Greater Things, in More Greater Things, we have garnered the support of sister churches. There's 11 sister churches who participate in More Greater Things in our ministry to kids. Some of it is financial, but also a lot of it is tissue. It's tissue. So with More Greater Things, what I mean is, at 2 campuses, at Chapel of the Cross in North St. Louis County, at Ebenezer Lutheran Church in the Baden area. Now we've been paused because of COVID, but what we do is we have Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday night, which is called the Ephrathah Activity Center. Ephrathah, Bethlehem, remember from Micah chapter 5. It's really just a kids after school program where we build relationships. We have, especially through my colleague, Pastor Boley, we have over 150, we're pushing 200 volunteers who come in at least once a month to volunteer to work with the kids. In fact, you know, and there's people from out here. Zion over in Harvester, they take like every Tuesday night with an army of people at the Chapel of the Cross campus. There's churches like Webster Grove Gardens and Faith Oakville and Resurrection and King of Kings in Chesterfield, and I'm forgetting a bunch of them. But here's the cool thing. First, the help is really important for us. Second, it's great, like at a table, where when we have volunteers, we can break into smaller groups, where you can have 5 kids around a table, 5 all African American kids, mostly lower income, and 1 leader at that table or two leaders at that table who are suburban white people. And you talk about, especially in the time in which we live right now, where we're trying to build relationships and that stuff, when there is that commitment that at least once a month, or some groups come twice a month, like I said, Zion sends a group, every week, people get to learn people and they get to understand what other people's context of life is, and they see it. And that really is powerful in breaking down differences. And it's all built around the gospel as we share our faith in those ways. So we're really excited about that. I mean, COVID kind of messed us up a little bit, and we're trying to figure out, we're just about ready to try to go for it again and realize that we may have some pauses. That's the world we're living in right now. If there's an, outbreak of somebody. But think about this. What if, okay, we got about 150 to 200 now. What if 300 Lutherans from around the metro area become an army to go into a place like, Ferguson, or helping us out at Bethlehem? And there's so many ways that people can help. Some people, that's their thing, working with kids. Some people say, not my thing, and that's okay. In 3 weeks, there's a group from Christ Memorial who will come down, and they're going to come and they say, give us a list of physical things around the property. That's so important too, because we have a lot of young African American men and women, but here's the choice. If you had a choice with like some of our adult young members or our adult older members, if you had a choice of them working with kids, if you had a young African American man, if you had a choice of him working with kids or fixing the toilet, and he might not even have the skills to fix the toilet, where would you put him? You put him with the kids, right? Because what an opportunity, especially in our group, in our area, for people to see, the kids to see, oh, here's a black man who loves Jesus and cares for his family. I mean, bravo. That's what we want to do. So there's hope. I mean, but it's going to come through partnerships and help. I want to say one other thing, and this is an Emmanuel thing. I didn't see him in here, so unless he's in here, he can wave. Dave Shadle has helped us over years. And here's how Dave helps us in a lot of ways. I mean, he's helped us in a lot of ways, but here's one big thing. Going back 15, 20 years ago, Dave said, hey, we'd like to invite you to come out to our basketball tournament, because basketball is king around us. And when we have a tournament at Bethlehem, which, like, the proceeds of our tournament doesn't go for a project, it goes to keeping the lights on. Dave, he says every year, first week of December, we go to the Bethlehem tournament. Good team, bad team, we go to the Bethlehem tournament. Good team, bad team, we go to the Bethlehem tournament. And that kind of commitment is so important. Maybe some people would be like, oh, we're scared to go down to Bethlehem. That's not Dave, and I'm grateful for you and the extended Emmanuel family who have supported that over the years. And that's really sprouted to other suburban churches who have come in. Getting those kind of relationships is vital for the ministry.
I want to piggyback on that. It's good for the kids too, because we've been able at some point to allow the kids to have a chance to interact. And when you get those interactions as kids and they start to see that people are people and they like some of the same things, and of course they've got that basketball connection in common to begin with, you're already planting some seeds that as they grow up as adults, they're not going to be so scared of each other. They're going to see each other as human beings.
Yeah.
Could you talk a little bit about the housing that you developed?
Yes.
And how that works with the church?
So about 20 to 25 years ago already, we noticed that one of the biggest problems in the community, it really came out of community need, was that there wasn't affordable housing, good housing. There were a lot of properties that were rental units run by slum landlords. And I'll picture one for you. There's a house on North 23rd Street. This is one of the places where it all began. It's the Purnells. They wouldn't care if I said what their name was. The Purnell family. When Mom Purnell was alive, she's since gone to be with the Lord. So she had 9 kids. And in the 9 kids, there were 3 sets of twins. You know, that was a big family. Plus, there were a few other cousins who stayed around. You know, and so how do you find a place to, you know, for 9 kids? Her landlord was a slum landlord. He wouldn't do really anything. And what he would do is he would wait till the yearly inspection that would come. It was Section 8 housing, where, you know, in Section 8 housing, if you're not familiar with it, many times, you know, the tenant pays maybe, you know, $100, and then the government pays another $800. And that's the income comes to the tenant, or to the landlord. And he would wait until the yearly inspection, and then he would throw Miss Purnell and the entire family into just panic. And we had a guy at our church, he was our president, he was an electrical contractor officially, but he could do kind of everything. His name was Ben Berry. So in the early days, Ben Berry and I was his gopher, because I don't know anything about that stuff. So we would go over and we would fix up all the things at the Purnell house to get them to pass inspection, because Miss Purnell didn't have anywhere to go. And her kids all went up to Bethlehem. These are young kids. These are like, some of the Purnells at that time were in kindergarten. So they would all go up to Bethlehem. So to uproot them, it's sort of like that essay on Tangled Web again. It uproots both their faith issue, you know, their faith connection. It uproots, you know, a place to live, which uproots a lot. It uproots, you know, where do your kids go, you know, after school, a safe place for your kids. Because as many people have said in our area, they say, look, you know, they tell their kids, you're either going to be at home, you're going to be at school, or you're going to be at the church. No outside, you know, just hanging out. Because that's never a good recipe in our community. So we went in and we were fixing that up and that stuff, and then God moved. He gave us, in a period of 18 months, 3 properties from basically landlords who just wanted to get out. And so we rehabbed one first completely as Bethlehem. We raised the money and we went in and, you know, ripped everything out. We were working on the second one, and then some of our sister church friends, that was before we had relationships, they came in and helped us, and they kept saying to us, they said, you know, these rehabs, this is a good idea, except you only got 3. So you got 3 islands in a sea of mess. You ought to dream bigger. We were like, oh, I don't know about that. And then through a series of relationships, we got to meet Ken Nuremberg and Michelle Duffy of ND Consulting in the city of St. Louis. They had done some tax credit housing. Tax credit housing is where you compete with big developers like McCormick Barron and so forth for tax credits. The state awards tax credits, Missouri Housing Development Commission, and then you sell those tax credits to banks. Banks want to buy them in big business because they lower their tax liability, but then they don't pay the full dollar for dollar. So you might get 80 cents for every dollar you have of tax credits. What happens is it enables you to raise some sort of, in a way, free money, but you have to stay with the property for 15 years. But what it does is it sort of buys down the risk a little bit. We still took out a loan and all that stuff. We started with Lutheran Church Extension Fund. I mean, here's how God rolled it out. So we were going to start with our first phase, which is 16 houses, Salisbury Park 1. And we went to Lutheran Church Extension Fund, and LCF was great, but LCF did what they were supposed to. I want to really say this. Dennis Klusman, he was our guide. He was just tremendous. They did what they were supposed to. They said, hey, we want to help, but come in with a business plan. You know, don't feel like, you know, this is just, well, you know, build the houses and we'll just sort of forget about $1.3 million. I mean, that's investors' money. So that happened. And then as we got to the city, you know, an amazing thing happened. Our alderman at that time was Freeman Bosley Sr., the former mayor's dad. And he was a very powerful alderman. He was head of streets and all that. Freeman Bosley Sr., at the moment when we were right about to try to get approval, he had an offer from the Salvation Army. Great people. My wife was a Salvationist. Great people, but they wanted to come in and right in about a 8-block area around Bethlehem, they wanted to build a compound where they would put 10-foot walls and they would house addicted men and women, homeless children, and homeless families. Just throw everybody in there. You know, what a stupid idea. But here's the deal. Freeman Bosley was going to make some money off that. His son, the mayor, was going to be the lawyer on all that development. So you know he was going to make some big money off that too. The Bosleys were. Freeman Bosley, when we introduced our plan to say, Alderman Bosley, we want to get affordable housing for families, he turned down that deal. Now, true, families are voters, you know, so, but you know, he was just really supportive. He could have made a lot of money, and God opened that. So we've built 4 phases of housing, 4 phases, 96 houses, and then our partners at ND Consulting, they've rehabbed, most of their stuff has been rehabbed, about 140 units. So we brought almost 250 new units of housing to the community, like a brand new community, over $70 million of development. And you know, the best story is this: the government didn't do it, private business didn't do it, the church, God's people, because better living communities, and everybody knows this in the city, the mayor knows it, Better Living Communities, BLC, is really Bethlehem Lutheran Church, BLC Housing. It's just we spun off a separate not-for-profit, both to protect the church and so that we could compete in the public realm without, kind of getting pushed away. So our housing is always full. It's good housing. It's empowering. So you've got to come in at a low income level, but you don't have to stay at a low income level. So if you do, some programs, if you do better, you lose all your benefit. Not in this one. So if you do better, you can one day own your house. And that's what we're hoping for families in that way. What has it meant to ministry? Well, it stabilized the community. I would say out of our 96 houses, there's about 10 residents, about 10% who come to Bethlehem. We keep flooding the neighborhood with stuff, but with invitations and with events. But people didn't come there, with the church in mind. They came there to get a house. And we can't say to them, well, you can't have a house if you don't go to Bethlehem Lutheran Church. We can't do that. But, that's helped us stabilize things, and long term, it's an interest for Bethlehem.
Am I correct that if they pay the rent for 15 years, then they can buy a house?
If they are the renter who is there at the end of the 15-year period, they have first opportunity to buy the house. Yeah. Now, none of the rent in the meantime goes to purchase and all that. But think about this: 3-bedroom house, 2-bath, rents for mid-700. That's pretty good. Other questions? Yes?
Was your ministry involved in any way during the Ferguson riots?
Here is where we were on the Ferguson riots. We prayed for the Ferguson riots, obviously, we didn't get into the Ferguson riots as far as a group, because here's what we said. We said, you know what? We need to keep working in the area that we're in so that what happened in Ferguson doesn't happen here. You know, we need to keep helping families and all that. And we didn't have the capacity to do both. Now, having said all that, we had people in Ferguson, like in Canfield, well, there's Canfield Green here where the Mike Brown incident happened. And then behind Canfield Green, many people don't know this, is a bigger apartment area called North Winds Estate. If this is where Canfield Green is economically, North Winds Estate is down here. We do a lot of work in North Winds Estate today, and even then, the day after the incident was on Saturday, that Sunday morning, I was picking somebody up in North Winds Estate. So, you know, now today, we have taken over at the invitation of people in North County. We've taken over the Hope Center. And the idea is we've kind of redone the Hope Center and tried to make it more strategic and say, well, what does the Hope Center do? For a lot of times, it was not as well defined as it could be. So what our Hope Center ministry is, and we just took it over like right before last fall, like October-ish. So we hit Christmas when not a lot happens, although we did some events, and we still have two families who from out in that area who come to our church who are from Hope Center. So we did God harvested 2 families, but then COVID came and it's just been hard. What we're doing in Hope Center now is we're flipping Hope Center around to call it the Hope Center for Families. And we want to strategize mothers, the mothers of all the kids that we work with in the EAC program. But again, it's building capacity. That's kind of like the next tier. We're not against fathers. It's just we can't like shoot with buckshot, you know, where it goes everywhere and hope that it, you know, affects people. We have to be more strategic to say, okay, we're working with a lot of kids. We were in our EAC program before the shutdown. We had 50 kids a night that we were working with from the Ferguson area, about 70 kids a week, because not everybody came Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. And then the next step that we were using with Hope Center is let's start to reach some of those moms, you know, just keep adding as we can with capacity. Yes?
All these people that you have, let's say you said you got a table full of children
Yes.
and a couple of adults. What is your curriculum or what is your goal, let's say on a given night with those kids?
Well, the curriculum that we use are simple Bible lessons to teach basically the truths of the faith. The goals are really twofold. You know, when we started the EAC program, at first we thought, oh, we're going to do after school, you know, homework help and all that other stuff. And our program starts like around 5:30. By that time, kids have been in school for 7 hours. Some of those kids have been on a bus in transit. And what we found was they weren't ready to just, let's do homework. And so what we do is, yes, we want to impart Christ. That's number one. But then the second thing we want to do is we want to build relationships. That's it. And so, you know, there's gym time in it. The Bible lesson happens there. There's mixer games. What's that TV show? Minute to Win It. You seen that? Minute to Win? You know, stack the cups up. Our kids love, 2 things are really opportune to our kids. Competition stuff. I think all kids like that. And performance. You know, can I show you the poem that I learned? I'll recite it to you, you know. Or can I sing? You know, like if you got a microphone, everybody wants a microphone. So, but if we can build relationships and pass our faith, that's the goal for that night. Other questions? Yes.
The Lutheran faith
maybe a little different. How do people find out about Bethlehem and, you know, make these connections to come there versus the churches that are traditionally in the neighborhood?
Well, so let me attack that in two ways. First, many people in the African American community grow up in a Baptist tradition, a missionary Baptist tradition. And in the missionary Baptist tradition, we're not far from there. Because the Bible is the Bible is the Bible is the Bible. You know, like when I went to the seminary, there was a class called hermeneutics. And hermeneutics, they would talk about, well, what's your hermeneutic, you know, and as far as, you know, what do you believe the Bible to be? And, you know, there are people in some circles debate that. Well, I don't believe that Jonah was in the belly of a fish, or I don't believe that Jesus walked on water and all that stuff. In this world, our world, it's the Bible. We don't debate that. And so for Lutherans who hold the Word of God up so high, as we should, man, it's a perfect link up in the African American community. Yes, we see baptism differently as far as infant baptism, but for us as Lutherans, it's all the better. Don't you want God's blessing and God saying that your baby is his child as soon as possible? Oh, yes, yes. And the sacraments, we see it differently. We have communion every Sunday. You know, one of the things that I saw, our people get, you know, they want communion every Sunday because they've realized that, you know, this is your encounter with God, you know, where he comes to us through bread and wine. Christ comes into us, you know, and we can't describe how it is. We just know that it's true because Jesus has said, this is my body, this is my blood, and that's it. That settles it. So in that way, there is kind of a natural, you know, where Lutheran faith is there. As far as how do people find out about us? Great question. We go from a strategy that we don't wait for people to come to us. We go to people. For example, this was a hard time. Summer, most churches kind of dial it down a little, take a break. At Bethlehem in summer, we dial it up. In summer, we do this ministry called Taking Jesus to the Streets, where we go into neighborhoods and we set up speakers with gospel music. Some of our singers come and sing, and then we play Bible games, kind of like a Wheel of Fortune game that reveals a Bible passage or that. So, and we get contacts there. Our Vacation Bible School, for a church that only worships about 145, our Vacation Bible School has it's not uncommon to have 250 different kids through the week. We have this ball field behind the church a little ways. We do 3 carnivals a summer where they're not like rides carnivals, they're just simple games and stuff. And we go to the dollar store, you know, we find someone who will give us like $300-400. We buy $300 or $400 prizes. You know, kids go home with armfuls. Great. It was a family day. And where did that happen? Oh, that was Bethlehem. You know, so all those little pops, you know, as we go. We have a charter school. We minister to the kids in the charter school after school, because charter school is public school during the day. So whatever way and touches that we can get to. Basketball, you know, basketball is a huge ministry for us. It reaches people and it's very, especially young men, and it's a huge opportunity for contacts. So that's our strategy. And then now, I don't want to miss this. So I'm able to be here with you today, especially because we're not back into worship. So our church is, I guess if you went from that wall to maybe here, and then maybe just over to that transept. That's our whole sanctuary. It's not very big. Our ceiling is not even as tall as where the brick starts. So we have not been able to go back into worship yet. because we can't quite figure out how to deal with, see, we have kids who come on their own and youth who come on their own. And what do you do when a kid who doesn't get much love comes running up to you and says, oh, I need a hug today? Because we're a very touchy church.
They just
Yeah, they just hug. And, what do? Oh, keep your distance. We understand we need to do that during this time, but so we're figuring that out. We are going to start communion first Sunday of October. But I say this all to say, how do you reach? Through the blessing of friends, we have been able to update our video ministry. So our video ministry prior to COVID was an iPad just filming the sermon. Now, today, if you go on our Facebook page, go to Bethlehem Lutheran Church on Facebook, please do. You'll see worship there. Today is the first day that we are broadcasting on a tape basis. Broadcasting from Bethlehem. But it's taken that long to get to that place. We had to put some lighting in. We had to fix some things of that. And we had to raise money to be able to get cameras in that, which we do. And here's the big part. We had to raise up a ministry of people who would tape, who would do that. Guess who does the video taping for us? They're middle school kids and high school kids. Which is exciting. We're going to have them for a while, which is exciting. They get to, do something that really is meaningful in worship and that stuff. But they're kids. It takes a lot of training. Yesterday we taped for music for a week from today. And there was supposed to be 7 people on the crew, and there were 4 people who showed up. So we had to juggle all the things at the last minute. But that's what we got to do, And you say, well, didn't their parents make them? Their parents don't even go to our church. Their parents don't even go to church at all. And sometime, if there's opportunity to come back to Emmanuel, I'd love to bring some of our family, some of our young leaders. I mean, what we have is there are people who were like 7 or 8 years old when I came in 1989, and now today they're 37 and raising their families. And that's exciting. Questions? Yes?
What do you find befuddles the children when they look at us? You have your inner city kids, and they look at the white suburban community. What part of us do they not understand?
I don't think you do befuddle them. I mean, like, if you come in at EAC night, I don't think you do befuddle them. They just see someone who's here, if you, and you wouldn't do this, if you sat in the corner, true story, I'm not going to say which church did this. It wasn't a suburban church, it was actually a city church. A city church came to see one of our other kids programs, BBO, which is Wednesday night. It's the outreach to kids on Wednesday night who don't go to our charter school. Starts off with the kids playing in the gym. They wanted to come and experience and be part of it. Some of you have been at Bethlehem, we're the old-time gym that's got the balcony. So Pastor Bowling said, well, we're starting upstairs in the gym. Okay. They went up. You guys can just go on up, play with the kids, do whatever you want. You know what they did? They went up one more floor and they sat in the balcony watching the kids. Now that's befuddling. But, if you got in there and the kids will come up to you, they're like any kids. They'll just talk to you and say, hey, you want to shoot? Can you shoot a basket? Or you want to play? You want to jump rope? That's the thing that's so amazing is that, especially with our EAC programs and all of our kids programs, kids don't see all the mess that adults see. And once they know you, once they build the relationship, here, I'll say this. I understand the city. I respect the city. But I've been down at Bethlehem at 1 a.m. in the morning. I've been up in, across Grand, where there's heavy drug trafficking up there. They know my red truck. That's the pastor. And you know what happens with kids? The moment I come onto the street, like when we were going into O'Fallon Place, there were some friends who were coming with us from sister churches, and they were like, oh, this doesn't look good, because there are a bunch of guys hanging out and pretty kind of tough customers. But the moment they saw us come in there and they knew who we were, the kids authenticated us. Oh, that's so-and-so, that's Mr. So-and-so, that's Ms. Blank, So it's an opportune mission field. It really is. Jesus was really right. The harvest is plentiful. We just need more workers.
And I know when we do our Taking Jesus to the Street events, and we've got some of the sister churches coming in to work with us, they learn very quickly. All you have to do is show some interest in the kids. If you see somebody with a basketball, hey, do you play on a team? Let the kids start talking to you. If you show any kind of interest in what they're doing, because the kids are showing up out of curiosity. And the sister church folks, they want to be a part of reaching out to the kids. So it's just a matter, some of them show up with a jump rope. Some of them show up with sidewalk chalk, so that you've got something to capture their interest and keep them going, engage them in a conversation, and do a lot more listening than talking. Because a lot of the kids, they want attention. They crave attention. If you give them any, they'll soak it up. They'll soak it up.
Should add this, what you're talking about when you said, what if like I'm here with that partnership relationships. And I'm not trying to put a plug in my book, but I talk about partnerships a lot in the book. The book is 392 pages long, but it's 93 essays. So it's my favorite kind of book. You read 3 pages, you can put it down. You read 2 pages, you can put it down. But anyway, in partnerships in there, one of the things we talk about is partnerships need accountability. And so the people that we are partners with, we tell you what worked, we tell you what didn't work. We tell you what the finances are, we tell you what the finances aren't, That's one mistake that a lot of urban ministries make, is they keep stuff secret. People don't expect, whether you're here in St. Charles or wherever, you don't expect that everything's going to work right, exactly like, to a T. The plan doesn't always work. But what you want is you want to know, tell me what happened. Did it work? Didn't it work? So I can have confidence in you, so I can trust you, And that's one of the things that we really try to practice. And I think God has blessed us in that.
All right, so we got the answer time, which means we're going to wrap things up for worship here in a second. We thank Pastor Mickey for being here today. One of the things I heard you say time and time again is this word partnerships. A lot of times we think we as a church are the ones who have to solve everything, but God has already placed people like you in Bethlehem, and people who represent the Hope Center to do a lot of the ministry that we can. So it's a lot up to us as God's church to partner with ministries like yours to really do huge things, whether it's a dime going down or procurement funds or those kinds of things. So that's one thing I continue to hear time and time again, how we might be the best way to be partners with you ministries that's happening in St. Louis.
Yes.
All right, we got worship. Pastor Mickey is going to be preaching for us after that. At this service, so to stay for that service is great. Otherwise, if you can't be 8 o'clock, it's cool too. We also have a recognitions happening at that service for people who've been here for a long, long time. So thank you again. We close the prayer. Gracious God, you have placed us in a place for a reason. You've called us here to St. Charles to minister to your people. Lord, we ask that you continue to help us to minister to all God's people, whether it's here or St. Louis, wherever it may be. Continue to bless the ministries for Pastor John, be with with him and his wife is head back down to Bethlehem and keep them safe. You might need all God's people said. Amen. Thank you again, sir.
Great, thank you.
Do we have to buy the book to buy for Tiana?
Tiana's about 50 different people.
It's like 20 different people, right? Probably different.
I mean, it's a story we keep seeing over and over and over and over again.